But look at all of this. It's a terrible slide. I apologize because it's a really powerful one. A Coca-Cola, the 12-ounce Coca-Cola has 11 teaspoons of sugar. And children typically, none of us typically buy the cans anymore. Most of them come in that middle size, that bottle size there. More sugar than any one of us should have in an entire day in one can of soda. Does not fill you up, does not make you feel full at all. It does absolutely nothing to sate your appetite, okay? In fact, if it's all you have is some sugar, it's going to increase your appetite because your body is going to metabolize that sugar very quickly. You drink a 12-ounce can of soda, and an hour to 90 minutes later, you are going to be hungry again. Because what's going to happen is your body is going to have used that sugar very quickly. It's very easy for your body to metabolize simple sugars. So it uses it really, really quickly. And 90 minutes later, your brain is saying, wait a minute, I'm hungry again. Where'd all that sugar go? We've used it up. Give me something more. So it actually can increase your appetite. If we could get ourselves off of the sugar-sweetened beverages, we would be much healthier as a country. We consume on average 50 gallons of soda per person in this country. It's a lot of sugar. For our little kids, chocolate milk, and again, you can't see, but that's a lot of sugar in chocolate milk. There's nothing wrong with milk. There's not even really anything wrong with the chocolate milk. There's nothing wrong with the soda. But when I was a kid growing up, I had a soda once a week. It was on my way to piano lessons. It was my mom's way of driving me to go every week. And we'd stop, and my kid sister and I would split a big gulp of Coke. And we'd split it, and it was once a week. It wasn't 5, 6, 7 times a day. It wasn't chocolate milk for breakfast on the Cocoa Puffs at school, followed by a chocolate or a strawberry or a cookies and cream milk. I saw that the other day and almost fell over. At snack, and then again at lunch. That's a lot of sugar. And one of them has more than a child needs in a day. Okay? Now, I am not the sugar police. I was asked to endorse the sugar tax, and I politely said no, thank you. Okay? Primarily because I don't believe that we can subsidize on the front end what we're taxing on the back end. It doesn't make any economic sense to me. But having said all of that, I do think that it is important that we recognize what this is doing to our bodies, and in particular, what it's doing to our children's bodies. So we've got lots of time. I'm going to give you a little physiology lesson because I think for teachers, this is really, really important to know and to understand, okay? We take fuel. Let's just think about food as fuel. That's it, nothing else, all right? Food is fuel, and this is one of the things that I use to teach the children. When I come in and teach kids, we talk about food as fuel, and we're going to build a fire, all right? So we take that fuel in 3 forms. We take it in the form of carbohydrate, protein, and fat. And the carbohydrates can be further separated out into simple carbohydrate and complex carbohydrate. Simple carbohydrates are, in their most easiest form to understand, just glucose, just sugar, okay? Complex carbohydrates are the fiber and things like that, all right? So complex carbohydrates, so you've got simple sugars over here and complex carbohydrates over here. Everybody knows what a Tinker Toy is, right? Yeah? Okay. When you take in simple sugars, that is a single stick of a Tinker Toy. And you eat it, and it goes straight through the lining of your gut into your bloodstream just that fast. Just as fast as if you had just given yourself an injection of sugar. Everybody remember the show with Julia Roberts where she, Steel Magnolias, where she has the diabetic episode. She's got too much insulin, and her mom gives her what? Orange juice to drink, okay? It's simple sugar. It goes through the lining of the gut and into the bloodstream that quickly. There's no processing that is required by the gut, all right? Now, complex carbohydrates are 10 Tinker Toys put together. Proteins are 100 Tinker Toys put together. Fats are 1,000 Tinker Toys put together. Those are the molecules, if you can imagine it. So you take in a complex carbohydrate into your gut, and your gut has to break it down into a simple sugar. You take a protein in, and it's got to work harder to break all of that apart down to that simple sugar. You take in a fat, and you can imagine it takes that's why a fatty meal takes a long time to digest. There's a lot of work required. The pancreas gets involved, the liver gets involved, all the gut juices get involved. All of that takes time. and it slows down the release of sugar into the bloodstream. So if you eat a meal that is comprised primarily of simple sugars, so let's say a soda and a candy bar, it goes in, hits your bloodstream, and your body uses it up very, very quickly. Now, a lot of that sugar will be grabbed up by insulin molecules and pulled into your muscle, into your liver, turned into other things, and stored for later on, okay? There's one organ of the body, though, that can't store glucose for future use. Can anybody give me a guess what that would be? Right up here. The brain cannot store glucose. It's completely dependent on whatever is circulating in the blood at any given moment. And that's really important. Now think about a child. Let's take this story all the way back around. You have a child who's walked into your school, who maybe, as we know that 30% of our very low income, free and reduced lunch kids don't get fed at home at all. 30% of kids on free lunch are not fed outside of school. So now you have a child who's walked into your school at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., who hasn't eaten anything since lunch or maybe after school snack yesterday. They're very, very hungry. And what do we give them for breakfast at school? Well, recently I've been seeing lots of sugar smacks and, and donuts and chocolate milk, you know, which tastes really, so they just get a huge sugar load, which the body grabs up and is delighted to have because the brain is not functioning very well because it's pretty hungry, and it metabolizes that pretty quickly. So what happens to that child at about 9:30 or 10 o'clock? They're hungry. Their blood sugar has dropped, relatively speaking. They're unable to focus. They're unable to concentrate. They're unable to recall information you've given them earlier. And in addition to that, if it's a little child who doesn't have fully developed social skills, or an older child who has them developed and just doesn't care anymore and is feeling a little angsty, they start hitting their neighbor and pulling on the hair, and they're up and down out of their chair. They don't act lethargic. They don't act like they're exhausted and just want to lay down most of the time. They start acting out. They start acting jittery. It's because their blood sugar has not been kept stable. Bring that same child into school and feed them a protein-rich breakfast with some complex carbohydrate, maybe a little bit of good fat mixed in there, and you've got a child who's going to make it from breakfast all the way through to lunch. Okay? Food is fuel. It's not entertainment, but we treat it like it's entertainment. Sugar smacks and stuff that make rainbows fly out of your head in the morning, all those Pop-Tart commercials, and butterflies flitter around and so forth and so on. It's not entertainment. It's meant to be fuel. And literally, for our bodies, the way our bodies look at it, it is fuel. And we can either fuel them up correctly or we can fuel them up incorrectly and pay the price. All right, there are huge barriers, I know. Everybody quotes them, to feeding our children correctly. The biggest barrier, if you want to get right down to it, is not financially that it costs more to purchase the foods. That's sort of been sold to us as a bill of goods. The biggest barrier is that we have forgotten as a nation how to prepare real foods. We just have amnesia. Our lunch ladies, my grandmother was a lunch lady for, 30, 40, 50, some ridiculous number of years. And she cooked everything from scratch, from the bread to the, I see lots of heads nodding out here. She was sort of the last of that generation to do that, okay? It was costly, not in terms of food, but staff. You're talking about, you have to have, if you're going to feed 500 children, you have to have 4 or 5 people, all of whom are skilled laborers, not unskilled laborers, who know how to cook. You have to have a kitchen that's equipped, and you have to pay them full time. In our schools, most of our lunch personnel are extremely well-meaning, care about the kids, enjoy what they do, but they're part-time, and they are unskilled labor in that they heat and serve. That's what is mostly required, or what is mostly given to them to do in the lunchroom, okay? So that's a big problem. The other piece of it outside of the schools is, what do mom and dad do at home? And we looked at where our food dollars are being spent in this country. Mom and dad are not cooking at home. You know, my generation of moms, I like to say, was the generation of moms who pulled their shoes on, burned their bras, marched out of the kitchen into the workforce, which was great. It busted the glass ceiling for me and for all of my generation of women, but there were skill sets that my mother's generation had that was consequently lost on her daughters and her sons, and then every generation after that. I am surprised by the number of my peers who have time and who have money, but do not have the skill needed to prepare a meal from scratch for their family at home. It really is, it's astonishing. How many of you, you don't have to say, but if you would be willing, how many of you cook at home from scratch for your family on a regular basis? Less than half, yeah. And there are a lot of reasons why we don't do it. You know, when you ask families about it, when you ask parents, well-meaning, well-intentioned families, they say one of three things. I don't have the time. It's too expensive. That is a widely held misconception, that it is more expensive to buy fresh foods and cook from scratch than it is to go through the drive-thru at McDonald's, okay? Or anywhere, or buy boxed foods even. And my family won't eat what I make. That's the third reason that we hear a lot. So we've got a program that's aimed at getting at those things, okay? But there are a lot of barriers. The other big one that I would say is this right here. Food is entertainment. You know, you will hear me say again, the food industry is to this generation of children what big tobacco was to my generation. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how to market it to kids, and they are marketing directly to children for immediate consumption. And all of just start watching the advertisements out there for kids, particularly the cereal advertisements, the Pop-Tarts advertisements, all of these things, and then they say it's high in fiber now. And they've got the little kid dressed up in the white coat, you know, like he's a doctor and so forth, so that now suddenly the Apple Jacks are nutritious. I mean, you know, or that if you have a Pop-Tart for breakfast, you're going to go skipping off to school and, you know, be full and be focused and all of these wonderful things that are going to happen to you. It's a ploy, all right? Food is fuel. If we could begin to change that paradigm, if we could create that paradigm shift in ourselves and in our children, that I tell my kids frequently, actually, I really don't care if you like it. It's nutritious, so eat it and move on to the next thing. I say that, and I'm kind of mean, I suppose, but that's what I tell my kids. And you know what? My kids eat what I prepare. They eat the vegetables that are on the plate in front of them, because really, it's not a negotiable issue in my family. It's fuel. Your body needs fuel. This is the fuel. Now, eat it or go to bed. All right. We are physically inactive as well. We recommend that children get no less than 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity every day. That means their hearts are pumping, they're breathing hard, they break a sweat. Now, all 60 minutes don't have to happen at one time. It can be spread out in 15 or 20-minute increments throughout the day, but they need at least 60 minutes. Well, our parents really are overestimating what their kids get. There's a really nice study done. Parents were estimating their kids got 146 minutes. When we actually monitored the kids, they were getting 24 minutes. So we think that they're getting more activity than they actually are getting, and we think that they're getting more of that sort of MVPA than they're actually getting in particular. All right, what are the reasons for it? Well, screen time is probably a big one, okay? I mean, look at this. 2010 Kaiser Family Foundation report says that children ages 8 to 18 are spending 7.5 hours a day in front of some sort of screen, and oftentimes in front of multiple screens. You know, they're multitasking with their phone and their iPad and the television on in the background or whatever. So that's a really big problem, 7.5 hours. This is an issue for us to educate our kids about. You know, they need to be, it's easy to lose a couple hours in front of a screen. We've all done it. I did it just the other day. I looked up and 3 hours had passed as I was, jumping from one blog and one spot to the next looking at things. It's really easy to have it happen, but we need to increase our own awareness of it, and then we need to increase our children's awareness of it. And they also need to be made aware of the fact that they need to get up and move. And it's, again, our responsibility to kick their little heinies out the door whenever possible and make them move. There are lots and lots of barriers. You guys know in particular what the barriers are in school. I've been working in School District 186 for 4 years now, for the last, and yammering on and on and on about the need for daily PE. Okay, at the elementary age, at the junior high age, at the high school age, it has been the one thing I have pounded on the most after the breakfast foods. And you've lost 2 PE teachers in the last 2 years for elementary school. So budget cuts, I know, really hurt. And physical activity is the first thing to go. You know, it just gets cut out. So I understand it, I don't like it, I understand it, but I think that what it underscores more than anything else is the need for us to find ways to pick it up, you know, pick up the slack. Not just because the kids aren't getting, you know, daily PE, but because they really need that opportunity to move if they're going to perform academically at an optimal level, all right? And we have some good programs for that. Sleep deprivation is huge, and I'm going to skim through this really quickly, but we do know that children who get less than 8 hours of sleep have a 300% higher incidence of obesity than those who get a full 10 hours of sleep, okay? So there's a big gap there. We looked at Houston public schools, and it showed that the odds of obesity went up 80% for each hour of lost sleep. So this is a direct link between sleep deprivation and obesity. I'm going to show you why in a minute. The most interesting thing, especially for those of you who are looking at behavioral problems in your kids, is not that sleep matters. The interesting thing is that how much sleep matters. Children sleep differently than adults do. Children spend 40% of their time in slow wave sleep. As adults, we spend only about 4% of our time there. That slow wave sleep is where they process all the information from the day. It's where memories are made. It's where language connections are made. It's where everything, if you think about library files and the way that librarians used to file things back in the day, it's where the brain goes in and files things. All right, it's the Dewey Decimal System time for the brain, is that slow wave sleep. It doesn't happen when we're awake. Okay, they need that sleep time in order for that to fully occur. And that slow wave sleep happens late in the sleep cycle. So if you shortchange a child's sleep cycle, what you're shortchanging is the slow wave sleep part of it, all right? The sleep research, the sleep data is new. This is a new opening up area of medical research. It's really, really fascinating. And I think we're going to find that the connections are even deeper than we think they are. But those behavioral problems, all of those things that you start seeing, you know, if you've got a kid who goes from seeming to be pretty okay and they turn a corner and all of a sudden behavioral problems start cropping up, you got to talk to the parents about how much sleep is your child getting. Because parents very unwittingly grossly underestimate how much sleep their children need. Our kids go marching off to kindergarten and they're putting in an 8-hour day like an adult. And somehow in our brains, we start thinking that they really need the same sleep that an adult needs, you know? Now, they'll up it by an hour or 2 hours. You ask the average kindergarten parent, how much sleep does your child need? And they'll say, oh, 9 or 10 hours, because they know they need more than the adult does. Well, that child actually needs a full 12 to 13 hours at age 5, 6, 7. So we really are underestimating. I know, I saw your eyebrows go up there too. We're really underestimating how much sleep our children need. Our kids are getting on average 1 to 3 hours less sleep than they did 30 years ago. Again, in lockstep with the increase in the obesity epidemic, there's been a decrease in our sleep in this country. Only a very small percentage of our children over the age of 5 are getting the recommended sleep a night, and high school seniors are the most sleep-deprived creatures on the planet. 6.5 hours. They need at least 8 to 8.25 hours of sleep a night. Now, oddly, when they go off to college, that self-corrects because they go to bed late and then they sleep in and they take the later classes in the day. Whereas in high school, you know, school starts when school starts. So there's some really good research. For those of you who might be interested in this in particular, there's some really good research coming out of Minnesota school systems looking at those later start times for the high schools, because as children enter their teenage years, their natural sleep cycle occurs later and later at night. The release of melatonin happens later. It corrects again around age 25. but the melatonin release that happens later, so they literally have a hard time falling asleep at a decent bedtime, but they want to sleep until 8 or 9 o'clock. Actually, they want to sleep till noon, but they need to sleep until, you know, around 8 or 9 o'clock. So what happens with sleep loss? This is really interesting. When you disrupt the normal cycle of sleep, you get an increase in ghrelin, which tells your body that you're hungry. You get a decrease in leptin, which tells you that you're full. You get an increase in cortisol, which is this lovely little hormone that says, oh, not only are you hungry and you're going to eat more, but I'm going to store it all as fat. And then you get a decrease in HGH, human growth hormone, which tells you, okay, go ahead, everything is well, burn it off. So you've set yourself up, and any doctor or nurse or student or teacher who's pulled an all-nighter will tell you that the next day you will eat anything put in front of you. I mean, I can remember being post-call and consuming an entire pizza, seriously, by myself. Because those hormones are screwed up. Your body says you're hungry, and your satiety hormones are non-existent. So you just keep eating, okay? And it does not take much sleep loss for this to occur. So for patients who have been doing very, very well on a weight loss program and have hit a plateau, we always look at, what are you doing with your sleep? Are you getting adequate sleep? You know, we have such a machismo nation that believes that sleep is somehow a weakness, you know, and I can thrive on 5 hours of sleep. And believe me, I have bought into this my whole life. Most physicians buy into this. We sort of compete with each other to see who can work the longest, most obnoxious hours. It is so unhealthy. It's such an unhealthy way to live. We all need, with very few exceptions, 8 hours of sleep a night for optimal health. Sleep deprivation affects intellectual achievement and lowers IQ. Children who test at a 5th grade, like a normal 5th grader, you deprive them of 30 minutes of sleep for 4 nights and test them again on Friday, they will test out as 3rd graders. 30 minutes of sleep deprivation. That is how significant this is. It depresses mood, it decreases long-term memory and short-term recall, it depresses gross and fine motor skills, and it is cumulative. So why is this important to you? Well, you can't go around and monitor whether your students are getting enough sleep. But certainly it's something you can share with parents, that you know you have been learning about this and that you know now that children need more sleep than you previously thought. And we have a one-sheet page on our website that you can pull down. I think it's on our website now. It will be, that you can pull up, that shows by age category how much sleep a child needs. All right. The AHA released an executive summary a few years ago stating that basically at the end of the day, we all need to be doing something drastic today, starting now, marshaling our public health efforts in order to address this crisis. And so from that, GENH was born. It's a community-oriented, educationally intensive, child-based initiative. Why child-based initiative? Because child-based initiatives work, right? Seatbelt Saves Lives was a child-based initiative in the 70s and early 80s. Today we have seatbelt laws in all 50 states. They take a long time. Any measurable public health effort takes a long time. But we have to start somewhere, and we decided to start with the children. So our mission is to create a generation of healthy kids through education, empowerment, improved nourishment, and increased physical activity, thereby decreasing the childhood obesity epidemic and its detrimental health effects. You notice that obesity is a secondary concern of ours in our mission statement. That is because, as I said before, we really believe that all of our children are at risk. We believe that the combination of poor nourishment and physical inactivity puts a whole generation of kids at risk, regardless of whether they currently have a healthy weight or an unhealthy weight. We're volunteer-based and comprehensive, and we take a multidisciplinary collaborative approach to dealing with this. We're health professionals, parents, educators, fitness experts, government, community leaders, and 99% of everybody who does the work that we do is a volunteer. We know that children perform better physically, academically, socially, psychologically when they're physically active, well-nourished, and well-rested. That's the whole reason that we do what we do. So here are some of our programs. This is Dr. Pendrangi. She's a PhD in food science and nutrition, and she leads our nutrition action team, which is comprised of physicians and nutritionists and dietitians and professional chefs. You see all kinds of professionals have come together to work on this team with her. And Destination Dinner Table is probably our feature program out of our nutrition action team. And the goal of Destination Dinner Table is to begin to help address those three problems that we were talking about before. I don't have the time, I can't afford it, my family won't eat what I make. So the goal of this program is to bring families into the school kitchen, to work with our executive chefs. The parents go off into the kitchen with our executive chef, and they prepare with him or her a from-scratch meal in less than 30 minutes. In some settings, depending on what setting we're in, it can be for less than $8 for a family of 4. Think about that. Less than $8 for a family of 4, a from-scratch meal. And meanwhile, we work with the kids. We take the kids aside. We teach them how to set a proper table. We go through table etiquette. We play games with them. We read. They get little nutrition education. And then we all sit down and we dine together family style. Okay? Parents get to go home with recipes, with a little bit of some tips and hints and education for them. We also are looking at doing this program just for teachers. Okay? And if we can garner enough support for this, we think what we could make it look like is something where we come in and we do a, sort of a sampling for teachers. We do right after school where everything is set up and teachers can see the program and see what to cook. And then you go home and you make it yourself that night. So it doesn't cut terribly into your day, but begins to impart those skills. Okay? Now we've partnered with County Market on this program primarily because County Market is really concerned with helping to encourage families to begin spending their food dollars not on the processed stuff, but on the real stuff. And to that end, if you enroll in this program, then you can go to County Market and take a shopping class free of charge. And they'll take you around, they'll teach you how to shop within your budget. If you show up and you say, I have a $40 a week food budget for my family of 2 or family of 4 or whatever it is, they will help you figure out how you shop in that budget. So it's pretty worthwhile, particularly at a time when people are really tightening their belts, okay? We also were looking at, and I just met with a former superintendent this morning, we're looking at putting together a school foods co-op. After 4 years of doing this, and I'm telling you all about this because what I want you to do is put it in your heads and begin talking to your administrators when you can, when the moment arises, about the foods that are being served in your school. We have to change the way we feed our kids. The National School Breakfast and Lunch Program, and there's evidence supporting this, is a direct contributor to the obesity epidemic. It just is. And our most at-risk children, you know, our poorest children, our children on free and reduced lunches, depend on those foods. We cannot be giving them non-nutritive calories. It's just patently unfair. It's unethical. It's immoral that the foods that we're feeding them are non-nutritive, that the calories that they're getting are non-nutritive calories. We have to change that. So we've tried a lot of different things. I've been working very hard on this for many years now. And the thing that I have come to realize is that if we're going to change it, we have to change the foods that are actually delivered to the schools. Schools are not going to suddenly revert to doing from scratch cooking in the school. As much as we might like to, you know, turn the clock back 40 years, it isn't going to happen. So we're going to have to begin relying on those vendors to prepare real foods and deliver them to the school, rather than delivering, you know, deep fat fried frozen chicken something. I don't even know what you would call it. And for us to reheat and serve, right? We need the foods to be real. So we think we can accomplish that through a co-op, where we increase our purchasing power and we find, there are vendors who do this, and find those vendors and say, we have 14 school districts who are banding together, and here's the 90 menus that we have put together, and whichever one of you can come in on our budget, you're the food purchase, or the food manufacturer that we're going to go with. So this is something that's in the early stages. But like I said, we're working towards something like that. We're trying to find ways to do this, because until we change the way we eat, we really aren't going to change anything meaningfully. Okay. The other program, big program that comes out of this is called our Healthy Seeds program. School gardens are a fantastic way to teach children about where their food comes from. It gets them outside, it connects them with the source of their food. They're much, much more willing to sample things when they've grown it, when they've had a hand in it. So great lessons. We have a whole program put together that includes education, and we can help build the garden, we can help plant the garden and help harvest the garden. So if you have an interest in a garden at your school, contact us, because we know exactly how to do this. And we can even help with materials and things like that. What we find is that in order for a real difference to be made at a school, it takes one teacher or one interested parent who steps up and says, I will take responsibility for changing the health environment in my school. And we know exactly how to help you go through those steps. So if you are that one teacher or you know that one parent, have them contact us, because we can help from there. Our physical activity action team is led by Kimberly Flanagan. She's a former elementary educator herself, and she has helped put together some great programs. Get Fit on Route 66 has been around for a few years. If you haven't seen that yet, it's a wonderful way to help kids log their daily physical activity, just in the same way they log their daily minutes that they spend reading. And they get to then go on the computer and watch their little individual sneaker, hop along Route 66 from Chicago to California. Brain Breaks is the program that I was telling you about that gets kids up and moving in the classroom in that MVPA range for 2 to 5 minutes. We will come in and do it with individual classes. We will come in and do it for a group of teachers at a school and teach you how to utilize. This is a terrific academic tool, okay? I don't know how much it really gains us in terms of cardiac health or physical health for the child, but as an academic tool, as a teaching tool, this is tremendous. Teachers really, really love this. It helps the children get their squirrels out. It increases blood flow to the brain. If we were to put these kids in a MRI and look at what's going on, their brains would light up like a Christmas tree, because all the capillaries open up, the blood is flowing, and a brain that has lots of blood is a brain that's ready to learn. Okay, and this is a way to do it. So Brain Breaks are a great way to get going. And then Jumpstart. And Jumpstart is going to be available to any school that has an interest in participating in it this year. So, and Brandy's going to talk about some ways that individual schools can get signed up for these programs. The main thing that I want to talk to you about are our statistics to date and how you can get involved. For those of you who don't know about us, it's not because we haven't been hard at work. We've hit more than 15,000 students in Sangamon County over the last 4 years, more than 4,000 educators and health professionals and business persons. And we've brought more than $500,000 in services and goods and programs and so forth to Sangamon County over the last 4 years. So, if you have an interest in getting started, the thing to do is to contact our executive director, who's sitting right back there. Brandy, why don't you stand up and come on up here, actually. This is Brandy Grove. She can be reached at brandy@genhkids.org, and of course always through our website as well. And what we would do would be for at your school to set up a meeting between myself, your administrator, and whatever wellness team members or parent volunteer you have at that school that's interested. And we would go through, and we've got some time left, and we're going to talk about it, what a contract with GENH Kids looks like, okay? One of the things that we know is that when we sit down and we go over what your expectations are of us and what you need from us, and believe me, when we say we will do something, we come and we do it for you. You want health education for your students, we come in, we set up a multi-station education experience for them, and they get to rotate through, and our teachers and our team leaders are there giving them the education, and then we tear it down and we get out of your way. We have Jumpstart. We will come in and show you how best to use Jumpstart. We will come in and teach you how to do Brain Breaks. We will come in and build a garden with you and get all of that set up. But in return, what we need is for the schools to say, you know what, these are the changes. These are what our goals are for our school in terms of its health and wellness. We would like to do X, Y, and Z, and these are the programs that we would like for you to bring with us. So we found that the best way to ensure that is to actually have a contract between us.